Short exercise 20-6. We're going to calculate the equivalent units of production. So Spring Fresh produces premium bottled water. Click the icon to view the additional information. Spring Fresh purchases artesian water. They then store the water in large tanks, and then they run the water through two processes, the filtration process and then the bottling process. So notice here we're working on a production cost report for just the filtration process, also known as a filtration department. At Spring Fresh, water is added at the beginning of the filtration process. So down here I've shown us our process. Here's the beginning of the process, here's the end of the process. So in this case the process is the water being filtered. So DM stands for direct materials. In this case it's the artesian water. So the artesian water is added at the beginning of the process and then the filtering begins. Conversion costs, on the other hand, are added evenly throughout the process. So that's what this is talking about. Conversion costs are added evenly throughout the process. So what are conversion costs? Conversion costs consist of direct labor. So that's the wages of the people working in the filtration department, and the manufacturing overhead, which would be things like depreciation on the filtration equipment and maintenance on the filtration equipment. So those costs are added evenly throughout the process. The 45,000 liters remaining in the filtration's ending working process inventory. So let's go to my slide showing the T account. So over here it says during February the filtration process incurred the following costs in processing 200,000 units. So we know that we processed 200,000 units total. Some of them were finished, some of them were unfinished and therefore are still in the department at the end of the period. It says 155,000 liters were completed and transferred out. So that's what I'm showing here, completed and transferred out. So if we process 200,000, 155,000 were completed and transferred out. That means 45,000 liters remain in the filtration's ending work in process inventory. So we can actually do this right now. So physical units, right here, this set of columns, the amount of units completed and transferred out is 155,000, which I got from up here. So we can plop that in here. 45,000 we're still in, which we get from right here, and which we get from basic math. And total units accounted for is the 200,000, which is also 155,000 plus 45,000 gives us 200,000 units accounted for. So the 45,000 liters remaining in the working process inventory were 80% of the way through the filtration process. So let me switch back to my other slide. So that's what this is talking about. Conversion costs are added evenly throughout the process. So at the end of February, 45,000 units were still in the department, still being filtered. They're incomplete, but they are 80% complete for conversion costs, but direct materials were added at the beginning of the process. And then finally we've got here, it says click here to view the costs. So if we were doing the whole production cost report, so here's a production cost report, if we were doing the whole thing we would later need the dollar amounts, but we're only doing the partial, so we're only doing the equivalent units part of it, so we don't need the dollar costs. So now let's talk about the direct materials. We had to figure out how many units have had the direct materials added to them. So let's just start with completed and transferred out. So all of the units that were completed and transferred out are 100% done. Therefore, all of them have had the direct materials, and all of them have had the conversion costs, which is direct labor and manufacturing overhead costs, added to them. Now let's talk about the ending working process. So these are for the 45,000 liters or units, whatever you want to call them, that are still unfinished, not completely filtered. So for direct materials, as soon as we start the process of filtration, we add the direct materials, which is the water. So 100% of those have had the direct materials added. So we're just going to take 45,000 times 100% gives us 45,000. Now let's talk about conversion costs. It's said that the conversion costs were 80% of the way through the filtration process. So these 45,000 units are 80% of the way. That means they have had 80% of the conversion costs added to them. So the equivalent units of production, it's the same as having, we're going to take 45,000 times 0.8 or 0.80, however you want to do it. That's the same as saying 36,000 complete liters had conversion costs added to them. So now we're going to take, for the total units accounted for, we're going to take 155 plus 45 gives us 200,000 units accounted for. And for conversion costs, 155 plus 36 gives us 191,000 equivalent units. So the tricky part about this is this 36,000 units means that of the 45,000 units that are partially complete, it's the equivalent of having 36,000 units having all the conversion costs added to them. And that's it.